Hello fellow humans and welcome to the E50M Tech Tour Review. Now let's have a look at the stats of all these vehicles, how to play them, and then let's play them. Now the stats of this line are quite nice. They all increase gradually with the DPM and the penetration, so is the alpha damage continuously going up. The weapon handling of them is very similar for most of them. The aim time does stay in the same ballpark. The tier 6 is a bit of an exception, but the tier 6 also sucks, so there's that. Now 8 degrees of gun depression is very standard for all of them, except for the tier 7, which has 6 degrees, which is not great. The mobility does stay somewhat the same. It's all around 20-21 for the tier 6 to tier 9. However, then the E50M does bump that up quite a bit to 27. And the armor isn't really great. The tier 6 especially doesn't have any armor at all. The Panther 1 does have some solid armor for its tier. Then the Panther 2's armor sucks again. The E50M and the E50L armor is pretty damn nice. I'll start off with the tier 6, which is incredibly boring. It's like a tier 6, 160 alpha damage, weak penetration, no armor. It's like all the others. If you played one, you can play this one. If you've never played one of them, this might actually be a good one to start with, because while it is somewhat challenging, it is still pretty straightforward. And the armor isn't great, then again, no tier 6 medium really has armor. And you can get some bounces because it's very well angled. What is more interesting on this vehicle are the modules, because obviously you have the upgraded engine that the Panther 1 and the Panther 2 use as well. So it might make sense to research the engine right here to get the vehicle up to speed, and you don't have to research the engine later. Obviously the tier 5 gun at the top is useless, and you need the top gun to get to the Panther anyway. Now, obviously this thing is just completely pointless, so let's finish off this tiny little tier 5 Churchill here. It doesn't have a chance. Ideally, you get into tier 5 battles, you have a great time. You don't really have to play this thing too much, like 30-40 times. If you can't play this thing, however, you might want to stay with it a little bit longer, because as we move on higher to the tiers, we get to the Panther, and that is, well, more armor, so you have a lot easier base there. However, again, the higher the tiers, the harder it is to play, and you don't want to be the guy that just goes to the top tiers and absolutely sucks. Nobody wants to have that. However, what you do want to have is good modules on this vehicle. Now the Panther, again, it does have that same engine as the VK, so you already have that researched. If you did it on the VK, the tracks aren't really that important. The top gun is the one that leads to the Panther. The other one is pointless. You don't really need that at all. So get the turret, get the gun that goes to the Panther. Ideally, you already have the engine from the VK, and you will be perfectly set. And you can even go to the Tiger 2 if you wish. However, the Tiger is a bit more expensive if you start going there from the Panther. So ideally, you still get the Tiger if you want to go there. However, again, it's up to you. I would still recommend experiencing the Tiger 1 anyway. Now, this is going to be a very interesting game, because it kind of shows if I try, then I can be good, but I don't. So, again, tracking shots is very, very easy and very important in this thing, because it does have high DPM, but low alpha damage. So you always want to aim for the tracks that you're able to track the enemy, that they can't run away, and that can absolutely shoot them every 3.7 seconds. Because if you end up, let's say, against a Lycan or against the IS, then they're going to be able to shoot a lot more damage into you than you can shoot into them with one shell, which means you need 3 to make even. Which is not great, but you can still do it if you're competent enough. Now at this point, it's a 4v4. It's Falls Creek, so the enemies are over there on that side. Got a Challenger and a Lycan, which is a pretty damn formidable vehicle in its own right, and also a Yaw. Now, what I want to do here is, you don't want to just push in and be a clown like this, because then you also have something like a Super Hellcat on the enemy team that is able to take care of you from a distance. Now, 160 alpha damage for a tier 7 is pretty bad. Now, yes, the Comet also has it, but that doesn't help. You don't want to keep trading with tanks on this vehicle. You always want to be in a position where either the enemy isn't looking at you and you can just simply take a pot shot like that, or you can out-DPM the enemy, which you can for a lot of heavies. But then again, you got to be careful you don't get out-traded with their alpha damage. If you can hide again, you got a problem. Now 3v3, it's not a great situation. At this point, I'm like, whatever. We'll take a peek at the Challenger. Now that's a pretty bad idea. I don't recommend doing that. Don't peek out sideways like that. Now I can allow myself that, because the thing is about Blitz is that making mistakes isn't the big problem. The thing is you gotta know what mistakes don't get punished. Like, what can you do and get away with it? That's the fun part of Blitz. because doing things wrong and it working out is one of the best feelings you can have. Now at this point, I want to get out of there. I want to get away from the Lycan. Now this guy is very annoying. He's still on HP. I'm 162. What I want to do here in a situation like this, 1v2, I'm a one-shot. I know their hit points. I want to break contact. I want to get away from them, right? I want to use the map. I want to use the space to my advantage. I have a medium tank. I can use that perfectly. And now I peek, take a quick shot. Ideally, you don't want to do that, but I know I am faster than him. I'm going to peek again. It unfortunately doesn't go through. It is a premium round, so that's very unfortunate. Now, he still hasn't shot. I'm just side-scraping this guy, and he's not shooting back. That's one of the most important things as well. If you are fast, if you peek quickly, if you can instantly zero in, boom, take your shot, and you're gone, then you can peek a lot of enemies that don't even stand a chance at shooting back. So that's very, very nice to know. The faster you can peek, the more people you can beat without even trying. Now at this point, obviously peeking out sideways here as well is not the greatest of ideas, but the Panther 1's armor does save me. Now he's on 2 HP. I'm not going to re-peek again, which would be the dumb thing to do. Instead, I'm going to get out of there and again use the map to my advantage. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a thing that 99.9% of players are not taken. And that is, you go one direction, and once you're unspotted, you turn around and you go the other way. Because the enemy will assume you kept going straight. But you didn't. You turn around, you come from the back, and if you go through the back door, it can... No, let's not go there. However, the back door in Blitz, like you see right here, is very, very nice. It can lead you to some free wins. The Panther is a pretty nice tank as well that you can play through easily. Now before we go on, let's have a look at the equipment of all of these because they're pretty much the same. This is the standard equipment I would use for all the vehicles. Provisions, use the 3 best ones if you can. If you are a free-to-play player, I would simply use the chocolate and the improved fuel and leave out the rest of them. Then, in terms of the ammo, a diagonal line pretty much is always the best way to go for most tanks if they're a standard loadout. And for the equipment, for the tier 10, I'm using the calibrated because it does have heat rounds. However, for the others, the gun armor might be more useful because they only have APCR, and with APCR you only get 5%, with heat you get 10. Then, obviously, the improved modules are very important on especially the 50M, but on the others as well, because you can ram, minus 20% damage for ramming. Then improved optics, engine accelerators, and consumable delivery system, just like toolbox, are very straightforward and easy. I'm using the enhanced armor on the E50M, and then the vertical stabilizer. It's way too accurate to even think about refined gun in the first place, so just use the vertical stabilizer. The worse your accuracy is, the more refined gun makes sense, and the slower your tank is as well. And then, obviously, the enhanced gun laying drive as well. That's how you... Pain. That's what the Panther 2 is, and that's what this game is as well. If we have a quick glance at the minimap, we can immediately see that the team is bad. You don't want to do that. You don't want to go city on especially this map. I'm still trying to go up here, trying to take the most important position on the map, really. But at this point, I've realized, okay, it's not going to work. I'm going to get out of there. There is absolutely no point at all. I'm still going to get shot here, which is unfortunate. But what happens here is we have camping heavies. We have one guy in the city, and we just have no map control. The enemy now controls all the good thing. Now, control is also very important, because the Panther 2 is painful. You need a lot of self-control to suffer through this vehicle. Now, ideally, you always want to equip the top gun. The standard gun is pretty bad, so before you move on to the E50M, get the gun that is checked on here. Now, we go back to the game, which is going to be extremely painful. Now, what I do here in a situation like this is that I know that the enemy team is the better team. They're positioned a lot better. What I do here is I basically throw everything I can between me and the enemy team. And in this case, that's the teammates, which means I throw the teammates between me and the enemy. Now, that obviously only works if you have the potential to then use your teammates' hit points and compensate for them with your own damage. Don't do that, by the way. If you drive over trees, they can see you. So ideally, drive around trees and the enemies can't see you. What I do here is there are 2 options basically to a game like this. It's either we lose and I still do relatively solid damage, or I carry and it's a win. That's obviously the more unlikely option. Now, the thing is, with a team like this, that is something you have to learn. To understand the team, to read a team. Is this a good team? Is this a bad team? Can I work with this? Can I not work with this? That is something that is very essential to Blitz, especially in a vehicle that is subpar, like a Panther 2. And especially something like this vehicle doesn't have great penetration. So if you're trying to brawl with an E75, you might be in a bad place. So you want to be sure that you're in a good position and that your team is in a good position as well, that they're there to support you as well. You can support your team, they can support you. If your team doesn't support you, you have no obligation to support them. That's how this works, essentially, in my opinion. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go for the Tier 49, because he's the biggest threat to my nest here that I'm sitting in. Obviously, it is not great to have to do this, but you're never going to have a 100% win rate. That is impossible. But with some games, you don't lose. Personally, if you do enough damage, they still do really well. That's how I consider it as well. Because if I do 3,000 damage and lose, it wasn't me, it was the team that screwed it. So, that's a nice shot, by the way. Just a note. Pat myself on the shoulder there really quick. But anyway, the thing is, the average Blitz player isn't really that good. And that's completely understandable. It's a mobile game. Some people just play it on their way to work. So, obviously. Which means, if you know how to read the teams, all those kind of things, and if you know how to peek fast, you'll be perfectly fine. So what I'm going to do here, 3v4, there is technically still a chance to win this, but not really. The ICU is going to get spotted, and he's going to get wrecked because he's still sitting on a hill. And, yeah, that doesn't help him at all. Know when you can't fight, and then simply don't. Just get out. Now, the Panther 2 is also something you should get out of. Ideally, you play this thing in mad games, in fun modes, in special modes. You can grind it a lot faster. You can skip it there very easily. So that is definitely something I would recommend to get through the Panther 2, because the pain will later be worth it. Now, if you're a new player, definitely play it out in regular battles just so you learn a bit. Because if you can play the Panther 2, if you're fine with the pain that this thing produces, you'll definitely be fine with what comes next. Now, the problem is that this vehicle is a bit of a two-sided thing. On the one side, it does have pretty nice armor. It does work very nicely. On the other side, having to play this thing stock feels the same as cheese grating your testicles for 7 hours straight. So if you have the free XP, then I would highly recommend using it on this vehicle to obtain the top gun of this tank. Because if you don't have the top gun on the E50, it is going to be really, really painful. So once you've achieved the top gun, you now have a tank that is actually pretty solid. Now, the big problem with it, that the E50M compensates, is that the turret armor in this thing is, well, while the hittable part of the turret is quite small, you can still pin it quite easily on the front plate of the turret, which is a bit annoying. So you might want to wiggle back and forth to compensate for that, to make up for that, so that you're fine. Now, this is Yamato Harbor, and what we can see is that the enemy team has decided to go into the city, and they have lost 2 people so far. They've only lost 1. That is good, because once you are in the city, you have 2 options. Push out of the city, or stay in there and die. Or, in the best case scenario, have the enemy team push into the city and lose. That works as well. Now, this vehicle is a bit more brawly than you can do with, say, a Panther, because the armor just holds up quite a bit better. And now, oh, here's the thing. I can do that because I know the 183 is not looking at me, and I can peek fast enough for him to refocus. But that's not a good idea. So, if you're starting off the game, be careful who you peek, especially if it's a 183, because if he was aiming at me, that would be me dead. So be careful, those kind of things. However, the armor can help you out with that, because the more armor you have, the more mistakes you're allowed to make, which makes this tech tree very good for beginners in the medium tank space. Now, ideally, I would start with something like an E100 or a 6TP as your first tier 10. However, once you go to mediums, I think this is a very nice tech tree to go to, given the Panther 2's existence. That this is a bit questionable. However, the E50, it's got a good gun, it's got solid armor, the mobility is fine enough. However, speaking of fine, we get to the E50M, because this thing truly is fine. It's an absolutely amazing vehicle. It's got spaced side armor even, which means you could theoretically side scrape against the Jagdpanzer E100. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but it's possible. To avoid getting shot in the turret, just wiggle it back and forth, keep moving. It will work out great. It can also ram. That is something I haven't mentioned before, because this entire tech tree can ram things. Especially the E50M, a bit of the others as well. Which is what makes the Panther 2 that good in mad games, because you can ram stuff. This is a very, very chunky boy. But it has extremely powerful engines. Not only is this thing fast and incredibly well armored, it can also ram the absolute bejeebies out of pretty much anything that it faces that isn't a heavier vehicle. Obviously, that has to be said, because if you ram a mouse, you're not going to have a great time. And there you go. Now, by the way, thanks to Applehead Fighter for providing this replay. I was too lazy to play. This was on my Discord server. Nice. If you want to send your replays to me, put it on my Discord server, which I would highly recommend to join, because it's a great place to be in. Now, this thing, it really doesn't really lack anything. In terms of, it has 8 degrees of gun depression. It's got excellent armor. It's got an excellent gun. It's got everything. Well, it does lack 10 alpha damage. That's a thing. I have no idea why that happened. Why it has now 340 alpha damage. Previously had 350, which it normally should have. It doesn't make any sense to have this thing have 340. I guess that's what we're doing now. Yeah. What we're also doing is pushing this guy, because you can do that. Bye-bye. That's ram kill number 2 in this game, which is fantastic. Now, not only can you do that, you can deflect shells from anything. You ideally don't want to expose your side to a 183 like I did in that E50 game. However, if you know what you're doing, this thing can be extremely, extremely good. I like that driving style. I like this replay. It's like my playstyle. Just horrible aim, horrible driving, yet impeccable results. That's how we love it. Well, that's a tight. Like, just look at this thing. It moves. It's like 70 tons, and it moves. This is as close to a true main battle tank as you can get in terms of World of Tanks Blitz. Obviously, it isn't a main battle tank, and something like a Leopard and M60, they are main battle tanks. But this is as close to a main battle tank as you can get, which makes this thing incredible. And if you don't have it yet, get it. Stop right now, whatever you're grinding. If you haven't gotten the E50M yet, you gotta get it now.